Imagine you're still alive, not metaphorically, not in a coma, fully conscious, fully aware. You can feel the sun on your skin. You can hear the water nearby. You are thirsty in a way that language cannot describe, but you cannot move. And the people who put you here, they're not trying to kill you. That's the point. Most of history's cruelest punishments were designed with one goal: to end a life. But there was one punishment invented over 2,000 years ago that had a completely different philosophy. It wasn't designed to kill you quickly. It wasn't even designed to kill you at all. It was designed to make death feel like a mercy you would never receive. This is the story of scaphism. And once you understand what it actually was, you'll never think about human cruelty the same way again. To understand scaphism, you first have to understand the culture that created it. The ancient Persians were not savages. They built one of the most sophisticated empires the ancient world had ever seen. Advanced architecture, complex law, trade routes that stretched across 3 continents. These were intelligent, organized, deeply civilized people, which makes what they designed even more disturbing, because scaphism wasn't an accident of barbarity. It wasn't rage or impulse. It was engineered, deliberate, thought through. The word itself comes from the Greek scaphe, meaning a hollowed-out boat. And that detail matters more than you'd think. The only detailed account we have comes from the Greek historian Plutarch, writing about the execution of a Persian soldier named Mithridates, a man who had committed the gravest possible offense in Persian culture. He had killed a member of the royal bloodline, not in battle, not with honor, in betrayal. And the king decided that a quick death would be too generous. So they built him something instead. Here's what they did. They took 2 boats, hollowed wooden vessels, shaped to fit a human body. They placed the condemned man inside one boat, lying flat on his back. Then they placed the second boat on top, like a lid, like a coffin, except with holes cut out, just large enough for the head, the hands, and the feet to protrude. Then they locked it shut. And then, and this is the part that changes the nature of the entire punishment, they force-fed him milk, honey, a nauseating mixture of both. They poured it into his mouth until he couldn't refuse it, until his body had no choice but to absorb it. And then they rubbed the same mixture all over his exposed skin, his face, his hands, his feet, every inch of exposed flesh coated in sweetness. And then they left him on a still pond under the open sky. You might be wondering, why? What does feeding someone do? Why is this a punishment and not just confinement? This is where everything changed. Within hours, the insects arrived. Flies first, drawn to the sweetness on his skin, then more, then larvae. His exposed flesh became a surface, not a person, a surface, a feeding ground. But here's what makes this uniquely catastrophic, and what most people don't realize when they first hear this story. The milk and honey he was forced to drink didn't just feed him. The combination caused extreme diarrhea. The waste had nowhere to go. It collected inside the wooden shell between his body and the boat, warm, sealed, moist, which meant the insects didn't just live on his skin. They colonized the darkness below him. This created something that historians have called, with devastating understatement, a self-sustaining environment. The more he ate, and they kept feeding him daily to prevent the mercy of starvation, the worse the environment inside the shell became. The worse it became, the more insects it attracted. The more insects, the more destruction they caused to his body, from the inside and out. He remained conscious through all of it. Days passed. Some accounts suggest Mithridates survived this way for 17 days before death finally arrived. 17 days. Sit with that number for a moment. Count 17 days on your own calendar. Look at them. That is how long a human body was kept alive inside that shell, fully aware, fully conscious, completely unable to stop what was happening to it. And here's the part almost nobody talks about: the psychological dimension. Physical pain, as devastating as it is, has a ceiling. The body has systems: shock, dissociation, unconsciousness. Biology is merciful in ways humans sometimes aren't. But scaphism was designed to defeat those systems. The feeding ensured his body remained too nourished to shut down. The exposure to sunlight regulated his wakefulness. The confinement gave him nothing to do but think. Every waking moment, and there were hundreds of them, was spent with full awareness of what was happening to his body. He could feel it, all of it. Imagine the psychological architecture of that experience. You cannot move. You cannot escape into unconsciousness. You cannot even choose to stop eating, because they force you. Every day, you wake up still alive, still inside the shell, and you have to reckon with the fact that you are still there. Psychologists today have a term for this kind of suffering: anticipatory dread. The horror of knowing what is coming, of having time to think about it, of not being able to do anything except wait. Most forms of torture, as horrific as they are, eventually end. Scaphism created an experience where the ending, death was simultaneously the only thing you wanted and the thing most carefully withheld from you. They made death into a prize. That is not cruelty born of anger. That is cruelty born of design. But here is where this story stops being about ancient Persia, because when you look closely at scaphism, not the physical mechanics, but the philosophy behind it, you start to recognize something uncomfortably familiar. The punishment wasn't really about pain. It was about control. It was about taking a human being and systematically removing every mechanism they had for coping. No escape, no agency, no ability to choose the timing or the terms of their own suffering. Just pure, uninterrupted, inescapable awareness of a situation they had no power over. And then it strikes you. That architecture of helplessness isn't unique to ancient Persian execution chambers. Humans have always found ways to build it, not always with wood and water, sometimes with institutions, sometimes with systems, sometimes with the slow, methodical removal of someone's choices, their dignity, their ability to shape their own life, leaving them technically alive but unable to move in any direction that matters. The specific torture of scaphism ended thousands of years ago. The philosophy behind it never did. We just got better at disguising it. Mithridates reportedly begged for death throughout his 17 days. The Persians refused, and that refusal, that deliberate withholding of the one thing he wanted, was the actual punishment. Not the insects, not the decay, not even the physical suffering. The punishment was being denied the ending, because once you strip away everything else, that is what makes scaphism uniquely, almost philosophically, evil. It understood something about human psychology that we rarely admit out loud, that what we fear most is not pain. What we fear most is no way out. Pain with an end is survivable. Suffering with a visible exit is bearable. Humans can endure almost anything if they believe it will stop. Scaphism removed that belief entirely. It turned existence itself into the punishment. We tell ourselves that cruelty like this belongs to the past, to another civilization, to people who were less evolved, less enlightened, less like us. But the architects of scaphism weren't monsters who didn't understand human psychology. They were monsters because they did. They understood exactly what breaks a person, not the body. The body can be broken quickly and cheaply. They understood that the deepest damage happens in the mind of someone who is fully aware, fully conscious, and completely unable to change what is happening to them. That knowledge is ancient, and somewhere in the quieter, darker parts of how humans treat each other, in prisons, in systems, in the slow suffocation of people's choices and autonomy, that knowledge never stopped being used. The boats are gone. The philosophy lives.